So in the 1990s, a British anthropologist, Robin Dunbar, proposed that the maximum number of stable relationships that any one individual can have is between 100 and 200. And, you know, a lot of you might be thinking that number's kind of low. Sure, you've got your family, your friends, maybe your not too distant relatives. But how many of you are also including, you know, everyone you know on Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram followers? For many of you, that number could balloon up into the thousands or even the tens of thousands. You know, and a lot of these people you may not know or may not be very close to. And the way you communicate with them will be in little brief texts, tweets, likes, snaps. But at least they're human, for now. You know, when I was growing up, I was fascinated by artificial intelligence and androids. And at the time, there were a number of movies and TV shows that showed artificial intelligence in various ways, shapes, and forms incorporated into society and daily life. Movies like Blade Runner, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Westworld, the original. All of these movies and shows had me believing that artificial intelligence could be an important part of everyday life, and it was coming. Now, of course, there were some bugs to work out, but artificial intelligence was going to happen. And nowadays, of course, there's a lot of movies and TV shows that also show sentient machines and artificial intelligence living side by side with humans. But is this a good thing? Before we go too far in the future, I think we need to take a step back to the past. When human language was evolving about 250,000 years ago, our means of communication began to evolve as well. It started with cave paintings, written language, epic poems, the Gutenberg press, the telephone, radio, television, and of course, the internet. And throughout this time, you could argue that the best way of having a conversation was still face-to-face and in person. And it's ironic because each one of us now, in our pockets, has a communicator that can reach anyone on the planet with full motion audio and video. And yet the vast majority of our conversations look something like this. And conversations that used to take place around the dinner table or a campfire or on the hood of a car are now part of a never-ending, multitasked experience where we're splitting our attention between the people sitting right next to us, our friends that we're texting, and everyone across our social media. And the thing to remember about multitasking is that while it gives the impression of getting a lot accomplished, you're actually doing a lot of things badly. So why is this important? Well, conversations, in person, face-to-face conversations, are where we begin to develop trust, where we become vulnerable, where we learn who we are and our authentic selves, and where we learn to listen and not just respond. And employers nowadays are looking for people who can do more than just write code, push pixels, or type emails, because your corporate career will be filled with moments of conversations. Some of them will be really easy, like talking about what happened on SNL last night. But some of them will be really difficult, like a performance review or having to let someone go. There's no amount of emojis that are going to rescue you from this situation. You know, Steve Jobs thought conversations were so important that when he was developing the campus at Pixar, he put an atrium right in the center, and that's where he put the bathrooms as well, because he wanted to inspire spontaneous conversations and collaborations and encounters throughout your day. And according to Pixar's CEO, John Lasseter, this concept worked from day one. And if you look at Apple's new building, there's a giant open area right in the center, presumably for the same reason. So hopefully now you're saying, okay, conversations are important, we get it. So what happens when we stop having these kinds of conversations? Well, first, we begin to lose our capacity for empathy. Because we're physically removed from the people we're communicating with, it's very easy for us to become emotionally removed from them as well. Next, we lose our ability to be spontaneous. We fix and tweak every single message before we send it, rather than just say what's on our mind or risk looking silly. We create a perfect persona that we have to maintain. Next, we lose our ability to be present. The constant chatter creates FOMO, or fear of missing out, an anxious feeling where we want to know what's happening across our social network all the time, often at the expense of the people who are sitting right next to us, which is not only really rude, but it's also keeping us from living in the present, living in the now. Next, we lose our ability to focus on anything that requires sustained attention. This could be reading past a headline for an article, or having a long conversation with a friend, or working on a specific task at work. Our inability to focus also makes us a little bit more gullible, because we take what we see and hear at face value, rather than digging a little bit deeper, which takes a little bit more time, effort, and focus. And finally, we lose our ability to be alone. Let's stop for a minute and imagine each one of us alone, without our phones, without our computers, without any devices whatsoever. Now, some of you might be feeling really happy, and some of you might be feeling really anxious and a little freaked out. Solitude is highly underrated these days. It's these moments of quiet, and you might call it boredom, where we begin to turn inward and actually discover who we are and become comfortable in our own skin. It's where creativity begins to bloom. The artist Picasso once said, "Without great solitude, no serious work is possible." Each of these elements is a part of what makes us uniquely human, uniquely ourselves. So you might be asking yourselves, so how did we get here? And is artificial intelligence a blessing or a curse? Well, you could say it started in 1966 when Joseph Weizenbaum created ELIZA. ELIZA was a simulated psychiatrist that used simple substitution and pattern matching to present back to the user what they had asked. And it was so good at doing this that people actually asked Weizenbaum for extra time with ELIZA because they actually felt like they were being heard. Xiao Ice is a chatbot created by Microsoft for the Chinese market. And Xiao Ice is similar to ELIZA, but it actually remembers aspects of your previous conversations. And it can mine millions of other conversations that it's had with all its users to extend and make your conversations more complex. I actually work for a company right now that uses conversational technologies to help customer support teams be more efficient. These technologies are great at answering questions quickly. And using machine learning, we actually can determine which answers are the best answers over time. And then there's Siri. Siri was developed by Apple in 2011, and although it got off to a little bit of a rough start, has actually improved a great deal over the years. And you can see that a lot of effort has gone into making Siri's responses natural and even funny. But there's something about Siri and the rest of these technologies that's a problem, is that they can't understand what it means to be human. There is no there there. Because artificial intelligence can simulate conversation. But the thing that makes conversations great and powerful is shared experience, empathy, love, a soul. How many of you have seen the show Catfish? Well, if you haven't seen it, it follows a person who's been communicating with another person for months and months. And that person invariably turns out to not be who they say they are. And these people are so desperate for conversation that they will open themselves up and even fall in love with someone who is most assuredly a fraud. But they are human. How many of you have seen the movie Her? I think this movie is one of the best films on artificial intelligence that I've seen.